Greetings. We are on week 2 of my Netflix and BBC Dracula review. So if you haven't seen part 1 yet, be sure to watch that before you watch this. And I would also tell you to watch Dracula before you watch this one, because there are going to be spoilers, and they're going to be spoilers. So, with nothing further, wait, one more thing. Spoiler alert, you have been warned. With nothing further, let's get to my review. There is so much to unpack here, so I'm going to start with the very part of the plot I so carefully shied away from in the last review because that's where most of the controversy lies. After the Demeter went down, Dracula broke out of his earth box at the bottom of the sea and walked up onto the shores of England, only to realize that 123 years had transpired. Episode 3 took place in modern-day England. First, the obvious. This was bold. The decision was most likely met with an "I love it" in the pitch meeting. Perhaps there was an afterthought there, perhaps there wasn't, but somehow, someway, a careless choice got through. Now, on a personal note, I love the spirit of this choice. I like being bold and experimental when it comes to films. I think I've said that before. But I still reserve the right to tear it apart if they can't pull it off. Fortunately, though, I feel like they pulled this off. And as I stated last week, it was because of the strength of the characters. Let's talk about them. Renfield. He was Dracula's attorney on retainer. No, he wasn't undead, or so he claimed, but he worked for the centuries-old law firm with which Dracula had good standing. He was the one who presented paperwork to the John Harker Society, thus breaking him out of captivity. Best use of a minion ever. Really, though, they took the standard, "Yes, master," and brought it into the 21st century. It was about as realistic as you can get given the source material. Realism isn't always a good thing, but I felt like it was used cleverly here. Next, we have Lucy Westenra. Throughout most of her scenes, I was honestly confused. I wanted to like her because of all the previous Westenra versions. Even in the book, she was a pure soul. Granted, she was less innocent in other movies, but there was always a certain goodness there before Dracula got a hold of her. But this Lucy Westenra was vain as hell and unsympathetic. In fact, the writers were savage with her. She was only concerned with two things: getting as much D as possible, him too, up until her wedding day, and her looks. She was obsessed with beauty. This Lucy had no virtue, and when she accidentally ended up in the crematory to burn, I found myself thinking, that's what you get. And we're approaching one of the few things I take issue with in this version of Dracula. Jack Seward. He was a medical student who had the rare opportunity to study Dracula and then help track him down. During this scene, we see him offer Lucy sweet reprieve from an eternity as a hideously burnt undead corpse by running her through with a stake. Why? Because he loved her and always had, even when she agreed to marry another. Again, why, man? Jack Seward was the exact opposite of Lucy Westenra. He was intellectual, timid, and unpretentious. It's hard to believe that someone like that would even waste time with someone like Lucy beyond a drunken one-night stand that he would come to regret. But let's move on. I've been saving the best for last. Agatha Van Helsing. Not Abraham Van Helsing. Agatha. The makers of this version straight up changed the gender of a main character, and it worked so well that if you think too hard about it, you may feel like Bram Stoker missed an opportunity here. Sister Agatha Van Helsing was a nun who had lost her faith in God and was stuck in a loveless marriage, as she put it, just so she could have a roof over her head. She gets her faith back before the end of episode 1, though, and proceeds to lay Dracula bare in front of all her sisters. Wow, that really didn't sound how I wanted it to. Basically, she compares his supposed strength to all her fellow nuns and their sacrifices. He is found in want. Unfortunately, he gets into the convent because a totally effed up Harker wishes death and is unable to kill himself, so he invites him in. As we find out in later scenes, Dracula lays waste to the convent, but is offered a deal by Agatha. In a scene that I hate to admit was kind of erotic, she offers herself to him, not to kill but to bite and learn from, on account of he absorbs knowledge through the blood of his host. In a creative decision reflective of the very best of our own time, but depicting the very worst of the 19th century, we're introduced to newlyweds Lord and Lady Ruthven, and Lord Ruthven's manservant, Adisa. This reflects the best of our time because the writers incorporated gay characters in this story. Unfortunately, Lord Ruthven and Adisa had to maintain a facade of employer and employee to avoid alienation, loss of status, and even danger. From this setup, two tragedies emerge. First, the obvious challenges that await Lord Ruthven and Adisa as they embark on a life hidden from everyone, even Lady Ruthven. And second is Lady Ruthven, or Dorabella as was her name. After telling Dracula of her naive plans to start a family with her gay husband, she is feasted on and murdered, never to be grieved by the man she so loves. But Lord Ruthven sure does fake it well. Not. Now, there's a scene in Part 2, the likes of which is not often put into movies in the 21st century, but they did it here and I loved it. Dracula and Agatha play a chess game and she questions him, much like she questioned Jonathan Harker in Part 1. Now, in case you haven't caught on to the dangerous game of wits Agatha Van Helsing and Dracula are playing, this scene should leave no more confusion. And since we're spoiling it all, Dracula wins that round when we discover that the chess game is merely a dream that an infirmed Agatha is having aboard the Demeter, where he brought her to continue slowly feeding. So this symbolic and artsy scene that takes place throughout most of Part 2 actually makes sense in the perimeters of the movie's reality. One word. Yeah. Don't judge me. Really though, this scene was a cool touch. It's artsy as hell, but not useless. Now I'm going to talk about a scene that'll make you feel rich. When Dracula first gets to the shore, he escapes from the authorities and ends up in a modest two-story house that the tenant describes as a dump when he appears impressed. He then talks about how she has everything, no doubt referring to kitchen appliances, the TV, etc. He then goes on to say that he is a nobleman and knows wealth when he sees it, and he has never seen anything like that. Did you ever think about how someone from the 19th century or before it might react to our modern tech that we take for granted? What would a nobleman have, really? Servants? Maids? That's all pretty cool, but when you think about it, even the super rich had a poorer quality of life than what we whine about now. This scene takes a very honest look at mankind's unprecedented progress and our lack of understanding for it. But a few scenes later, even Count Dracula is giving 0 Fs as he texts Lucy on his smartphone, and they make plans to meet up at the cemetery to talk about death. Classy. Did I miss anything? I'm sure there's more to go over. Comment by all means. We'll have a talk. Thanks. And that's that. Don't forget to like this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. And thanks a lot. I appreciate the support. See you next week.